agenda anyway, and see whether others join us along the way. If not, they'll have hopefully this week they'll have a recording that they can reference to catch up. One of the things that I wanted to bring up is that I'm taking a fresh look at. Oh, here comes somebody by phone, at least.
Hello?
Hello. Yes.
Hi, this is Emma.
Oh, you're just joining by phone?
Yeah, I was having trouble with my Blackboard, so I figured instead of it disconnecting me, I would just call and make it easier.
Okay. Well, any Blackboard issues shouldn't affect the Zoom connection, I wouldn't think.
Okay.
But well, I'm glad to have you by this medium at least. So glad, and then it looks like we might have someone else joining us. Oh,
Okay. Oh no, that's me. I got
oh,
it to
yeah,
work
you
on
are.
the computer. Okay.
Okay. Well, that's
I'll
great.
hang up on the.
All right. Well, so how are things out in the West Coast?
Oh, rainy.
Rainy.
Really rainy.
Okay. Well, we're just damp and dreary, but not quite rainy yet. But anyway, what I was just about to say, I just started recording this session to make it available in the event that someone couldn't join us tonight. We have one other person who might hopefully join us yet, but we'll get started. What I was just starting to say at the time you called in was that I've been taking a look at the syllabus again and trying to decide, from the very beginning, I was a little concerned about the volume of material that we have reflected in that syllabus and your ability to digest and keep up with things. And, the one thing I didn't want to do, I was sort of torn. I didn't want to obviously create a workload for you that would dishearten you, cause you to fall behind, get frustrated, and in that way not get the most out of the course. But at the same time, there's the mandate is to try to fit in a full semester's worth of work in this short 7-week period. And so that what you see in the syllabus reflected what I believe would be a reasonable full semester's worth of material. But I again don't want the pace of things and the volume of work to be done to overwhelm you. So obviously it's early, but how do you feel? Do you feel it's going to be something you can sustain for the next 6 weeks at that level, or is it going to become just unmanageable? My option is basically to perhaps drop a few chapters, which probably would be at the chapters at the very end on derivatives, and basically then slow down a little bit, use that extra week to stretch out the remaining material. I am going to be using what I'll call some minimal cases. We have a couple of cases scheduled into the syllabus as part of your deliverables, and I'm not going to use grandiose cases. They're going to be pretty straightforward and limited in scope, again with the objective of not overburdening you. One of the other things I'm considering doing, since the homework is one of the major things I know that you'll be spending time on, I'm also thinking of shifting a little bit of the weighting from the exams to the homework. The homework is the single biggest effort you're probably putting in, other than perhaps listening to the video lectures and so forth. But I didn't want to do any of this without running it by you first. In terms of shifting some of the grade weighting, it would be like reducing from 25% each to 20% each the exams, and shifting those values over to the homework probably. That's one thing, and I mentioned earlier that I was pretty happy with the quality of the work I was seeing come in from you on the homework, albeit it's only 1 week's assignments. But I was real pleased with the quality of the work that you were submitting. looked as if you were really diligently absorbing and working on the material, and that's heartening. So I congratulate you. Keep up the good work. Any thoughts on the syllabus and the scope of work we want to try to cover in this course? As I said, I've tried to give you your money's worth, so to speak, in the course I laid out. But can we continue this pace in another week or so and see how it's going, and then revisit this issue?
I'll answer that. I know I'm already feeling a little stressed on this week on how much material we have to cover. I started reading today and found myself just having to go back and reread some things because I wasn't absorbing them. And then the stress started because I thought, how am I going to get through 3 chapters if I continue to have to reread? So I'm a little concerned this week already about the amount of work it is.
You're looking at the second week's assignments, in other words.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I just received my book, so I'm playing catch up, and I only was able to submit the interest rate problem.
Right.
Those weren't bad. I haven't had the chance. I did see though that it was a lot of problems we have to answer from the 3 chapters, so it might be a bit overwhelming, but I don't know how long or how difficult the problems are yet.
Okay. Well, a lot of the problems are pretty quick and easy, straightforward applications of some of the basic tools and concepts in the chapters. Some of them, though, a few of them, as you would expect, to start to get into a little more integrative treatment of the topics. All right, I'll tell you what. Let me work on. I think what I may do is slide one of these 3 chapters out a week, and sort of cascade things down through the schedule a bit. It just turns out that these chapters actually sort of go together. They are related, so it would be nice to be able to do them all in one block. But I do not want to overwhelm you. I'd rather have you be able to spend reasonable time and learn as effectively as you can from the material. So, but I'll revisit that. And why don't we assume that we'll only be doing chapters 4 and 5 this week, and I'll adjust the assignment layout tomorrow accordingly. Okay.
Sounds good. Thank you.
I'm a softie, I'm easily influenced, but anyway, let's see. One other thing, since I gave you that concession, but we also will be having some discussion forums, and I've got one teed up that I'm probably going to launch out to you within the next few days. So that's something you'd be looking to see come your way. That's another good reason to perhaps delay some of the text material. I also want to make a comment in the administrative area here on my use of the grade center in Blackboard. I find, I don't find that Blackboard grading system real user-friendly from an instructor point of view. And so while I'll try to keep grades posted there as we go along, keep everything there on as real-time basis as I can, you shouldn't expect that the grade center as we go through the course is going to be the place where you'll be able to get a reliable, instantaneous view of how you're doing against the total points for your final grade in the course. If at any point you've got any questions, you don't understand where you are on grading, send me an email. I'll be glad to give you a snapshot of where you are at the time. But I just have never used the Blackboard Grade Center for a comprehensive grade repository, if you will. The last thing on the administrative front that I wanted to mention you've probably seen it in the video lectures and perhaps in the syllabus too, but it's kind of important that you develop a skill in using either a calculator or Excel spreadsheet to do calculations and analysis in this course. Do all of you have a business calculator, and have you tried to begin to use it yet?
I don't have the actual calculator. I have an app on my iPad.
Okay, well, if it's got all the discounted cash flow functionality, that's fine.
Well, I'll have to see. I had when I upgraded my iPad a year or so ago, that app I think was on my husband's account, and I paid like I think $15 for it. It was like the
10B2.
Yeah. So, and it was great, but I think it's on his account, so I have to get on his account to retrieve it and put it on my new iPad.
Okay, well, certainly if you can get access to that, that's perfectly acceptable. Ideally for these courses, regardless of where I'm teaching in these basic finance courses, I encourage students to develop expertise in the use of the calculator, but also to try developing familiarity with the Excel spreadsheet functions, because at different points in time, different types of problems will be more conducive to be done on spreadsheets than on the calculator. But the calculator, having the skills and use of the calculator is going to be a great skill that you'll carry away from the course you'll find of great value in your personal life as well as in your MBA program. So I really encourage you to give it a try, and don't hesitate to in these sessions or even in emails bring up questions if you're frustrated with trying to find your way to use the calculator. But the HP calculator, or its analog there in the app, it's about as user-friendly as you can get. And so,
do you think we'll need both Excel and the calculator? Because I've only used Excel. I haven't used the calculator, but
yeah.
I could get one.
Well, the short answer is that Excel by itself would be enough for purposes of this course. But I really do encourage you, if you can, to develop the calculator skill. Now, the HP calculator, the HP 10B2, 10B2 Plus, whatever version it's in now, I've had students tell me they've gotten them for in the $20 range on Amazon or something. So they're very inexpensive, and it's got all the capability you would need for certainly this course and most anything else you'd want to do.
I got mine on Amazon for $19.99, and
okay.
they shipped. I think I had free shipping too, so it was really beneficial.
Do you think they sell them at Walmart?
What you generally find is that the HPs are a little harder to find in places like that, and they'll typically have Texas Instruments, but the TI calculators are just not as user-friendly. So I really encourage you to try to spend the extra effort to get the HP unit.
What store would you recommend going to?
In the past, I think Staples is a name. I've had people say they're able to get them there. You might pay a few more dollars than you would getting them at Amazon, but if you've got Excel capability and you're comfortable with that Excel capability, you can, you don't have to be in a hurry to get the calculator, but obviously the sooner the better. And if you've already got competency with Excel, it's good to be able to do the calculation in one venue and then check your work in another venue to help you, get up the learning curve with the calculator, for example. But either a calculator or Excel, I think, is probably minimal. Doing both would be ideal, and I think my recommended pathway for you, but that's really your call. I've had students do just Excel. They get frustrated with the calculator, and they just never do anything other than Excel spreadsheet, which is fine. Okay. Well, for this week's assignments, then let's assume that we're going to be dropping chapter 6 into the following week. We'll just have chapters 4 and 5, and that'll cut you down to about 2 hours of video lecture segments associated with those 2 chapters as well. And then, of course, obviously, the quizzes would just be those associated with chapters 4 and 5.
Okay.
Are there any questions on, in general, on material covered thus far in week 1? As I said, the homework that you've submitted has reflected surprisingly good mastery of the material, in my view. But each one of these weeks, these sessions, I want to make first and foremost to address any open questions you have on the material, something that wasn't clear from the book, from the PowerPoints, whatever. Is there anything specific you'd like to cover?
I just have a question, and I think I got it answered as I read through some of the material, but the difference between treasury bonds, treasury bills, I think it's the length of time.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Is that what, okay.
Yeah, it really is just a terminology issue there. I mean, these are all, there's basically 3 classifications of treasury debt securities. And in finance, we spend a lot of time paying attention to what's going on in the treasury debt market, because that market sets the foundation for interest rates for everything else, because the treasury debt is considered to be default free. The government can always print money to pay what they owe you. That's why that debt is considered default free, despite the fact that the U.S. government owes $17.5 trillion to lenders around the world. But the nomenclature is this way: a treasury bill is a short-term debt instrument that is 1 year or less to maturity. So at the time they're issued, the treasury bill would be as short as a 30-day security, all the way up to a 52-week or 1 year security. The other thing about treasury bills that make them unique is that they are they're what referred to in one of these chapters as pure discount securities. You don't receive periodic interest payments. If you buy a treasury bill, you don't receive a check in the mail every 6 months, and that's obviously because they're of short-term maturity anyway. So your interest is totally baked into the difference between the price you pay for it and the price you receive when it matures, when the principal is repaid to you. So that's what makes them somewhat unique. Beyond 1 year, let's say from 2 years to 10 years, treasury debt is officially designated as a treasury note. So up to 10 years, longer than bills, up to 10 years are treasury notes. And then the term bond is really applied to the 30-year. Treasury issues debt in as long as 30-year maturities. They suspended 30-year issues back in between 2000 and 2004 or 5, I think, because they thought we might actually be starting to pay our national debt down. They wouldn't need those long-term securities, but then that thought evaporated, and the rates were pretty attractive. So long about 2004 or 5, they reinstituted the issuance of 30-year treasury bonds. So the bond is the 30-year, the notes are the 2 to 10s, and of course you got 30-year bonds that were issued 10 years ago that now have 20 years of maturity that are out there in the market as well. But and those are also called bonds. But yeah, that's the designation that applies to treasury debt.
Yeah, and I had one other question that I'm not sure what I don't know what the answer is. I know we talked about in the book, we talked about shareholders wanting to see less cash on the balance sheet and more debt. Why is that?
Well, I'll address that in a minute. But are you citing something from the text or in the PowerPoints?
On I'm not really sure where I got it from.
Okay.
Somewhere in the material from last week.
Okay. Well, you normally think about, well, a company having a lot of cash, that's a good thing. That indicates a strong ability to pay their bills and so forth. But remember, assets held in the form of cash or near cash, like marketable securities, on a balance sheet, is really capital that's not working. It's really not earning a very good rate of return in most cases.
Sure.
It's basically parking capital in a low return use. And so shareholders actually shouldn't want to see a company just piling cash on the balance sheet. In most cases, as has often happened recently, including with Apple, when Carl Icahn pressed Apple to start paying dividends and returning more money to shareholders because they had $140 billion of cash on their balance sheet. He said, if you're not going to do anything with it, give it to us. We got things we can do with it. And they indeed began making dividend payments. So this is where, I don't know if you've done any ratio analysis in your accounting courses. Did you look at quick ratios and liquidity ratios, that sort of thing?
Yes.
Yeah, one of the reasons I'm not a big fan of ratio analysis is that it depends on who you are evaluating the ratios, because creditors, the people to whom you owe money, like to see a lot of cash on the balance sheet because the rate of return isn't what's important to them. What they're concerned about is how much cash you have in the till to pay your bills. So what constitutes a good liquidity or good quick ratio depends upon who you are as the evaluator. So you also mentioned debt, that shareholders like to see more debt.
Or stockholders would rather see more debt than cash on the balance sheet.
Well, but remember, cash is an asset and debt is a liability. So they appear on opposite sides of the balance sheet, so one doesn't preclude the other. The only thing about what you may be alluding to, I'm not sure, is once a company is up and running and is publicly owned, shareholders don't like to see more stock issued. They'd rather see capital raised normally in the form of debt as opposed to new stock, because there's just sort of like become this conditioned reflex on the part of markets that they don't like to see companies issue new stock because they believe it dilutes earnings per share, and basically the main reason is common stock equity capital is very expensive money. It's normally much cheaper to borrow money, especially in today's market, than it is to raise new equity capital. We're also at some point going to talk about flotation costs. Floating new equity, the cost of actually making an increase in the number of shares outstanding is a pretty expensive process. Something like, say, 8 to 15% of the total money raised in a stock sale doesn't make its way to the company. It goes to the investment bankers, to the lawyers, those legal kinds of fees. So shareholders don't like to see more, as I like to say, shareholders don't like to see more girls brought to the dance. They think there's enough girls there already, and they don't want any new girls brought to the dance because they'd rather be able to dominate the scene. But that's really what it's all about. Shareholders like the use of debt unless it becomes excessive. And as you can imagine, all things in moderation. And later on, we'll talk about capital structure, which is what this is all about. How much debt, how much equity should be used to finance the company. But as long as you're not already at an excessive use of debt, shareholders would in general rather have you finance the future growth of the company through a combination of retained earnings. If you're profitable and you want to invest some more, use retained earnings and supplement that with borrowed money and maintain a balanced capital structure going forward. That's sort of the typical point of view, right? Did I address your question?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Well then, let me make some comments and give you some indicators of what's really important in these couple of chapters we're going to be doing this week. I'll limit it, given what we've decided already, to chapters 4 and 5. I was prepared to talk about 6 as well, but let's limit it to 4 and 5. Chapter 4 deals with discounted cash flow valuation. You know, there's nothing more fundamentally important to your ability to do financial analysis than to master these tools of discounted cash flow valuation. It's important that you understand, first of all, why it is that money or capital has time value. What do we mean by time value of money? Can you give me an idea? When I say money has time value or capital has time value, what do we mean by that?
Well, with more time, the more value your money could potentially have.
Okay, but that's because of the existence of positive interest rates, right? That what gives money time value is the fact that you can create wealth with money through the return on capital. So if you want to use somebody else's money, you should expect to pay for its use. That's really what the time value concept is all about. And that basic time value, as reflected in positive interest rates, is what is the basis for this discounted cash flow analysis, the present value, future value concepts that we'll discuss in this chapter. Now, it's very important that you spend time as you're working on problems, for example, classifying the cash flows or the flows of cash that are given in a problem to be one of these generic types: a present value, a future value, a payment, so forth. And along those lines, I really recommend you, when you're doing these problems, if they're at all complicated, lay out a timeline, draw a little line with some time ticks on it where you designate which direction money is flowing and how much, and thereby sort of forcing yourself to properly classify a cash flow as being a present value or a future value, for example. Of course, the other variety of cash flows that we typically deal with are called annuities. Anybody know what an annuity is?
Well, it's annuity would indicate that it's an annual payment. So for every year you would get some return on your investment.
Well, the annuity does seem to imply an annual payment, but actually in this case the name is a little misleading in this sense. An annuity is any cash flow stream wherein you get a periodic cash payment of an equal amount occurring for some number of periods. The key is that it doesn't have to be just once a year. It could be once a quarter, once a month. Your mortgage loan structure is a monthly annuity. When you borrow money on the mortgage, you promise to make a large number of monthly annuity payments in exchange for getting that money to buy your house. So a 30-year mortgage has 360 monthly payment obligations that come along with it. So the key is that the payments occur at regular intervals and they are of equal amounts. That's what constitutes an annuity. There's also a special form of an annuity called a perpetuity. Perpetuity is an annuity that goes on forever. It's an infinite annuity, if you will. it's kind of important that you quickly also grasp the basic math involved in the relationship between a present value and a future value. When we talk about a future value cash flow, we're talking about a single payment occurring at some point in the future, as compared with an annuity, which is multiple payments, multiple cash flow payments. A future value payment is a single payment. The basic math linking a present value to a future value is called either compounding or discounting, depending on which way you're going on the timeline. If you're taking a present value to a future value, it's called compounding. If you're bringing a future value back to present value, it's discounting. So pay some attention to the basic math involved. It's very straightforward. There's no rocket science there. This also leads to the term net present value that we're going to use a lot. Net present value. Anybody know what the definition of a net present value is?
Economic gain from an investment.
That's one definition. It's the one I got here on my paper, in fact. As you might have pulled those notes off of I put them up on Blackboard already. So yeah, that actually is, of course, specifically in the context of making an investment. And that's normally where we use net present value. Net present value, the net part comes in the sense that you're taking the discounted present value of future benefits or positive cash flows that an investment will produce and comparing it against what it costs to make the investment. So it's the present value of the rewards net of the cost of getting into the investment. So that's where net present value comes into play. You're also going to see in this chapter that that at various points in time, in addition to being able to calculate present values and future values, you'll also sometimes want to calculate an unknown interest rate. You'll know everything except the discount rate, and whether it's through the calculator or through the use of Excel spreadsheets, it's kind of important that you be able to find unknown interest rates and sometimes even unknown numbers of periods. How long would it take to pay off a loan of a certain amount if you pay so much per month or per year? In Excel, these involve the use of the rate function or the NPER, number of periods function, to find those as the unknowns. I think this chapter also introduces the rule of 72. Have you ever run into the rule of 72?
Heard of it.
You've heard of it? Okay. It's really not a rule in the terms of it being a hard fact of science. It's actually an approximation. But the rule of 72 is a handy shorthand device that allows you to calculate how long it takes to double something in value. So if you have a certain amount of money now and you want to try to figure out how long it's going to take for it to double in value, the product of the interest rate you're earning or the rate of return you're earning times the number of years, combinations where those products equal 72 represent a doubling periods. So for example, 6% will double in 12 years. 6 times 12 is 72. Excuse me. 8% for 9 years is a doubling combination. That's the rule of 72. And again, it comes in handy at times to just make rough approximations. As you go ahead in your, for those of you who are going to try to develop use of calculator, please, don't hesitate to fire off questions to me. Or if you're trying to replicate a calculation and you can't make it work on your calculator, try to ring me in via email, if nothing else, and I'll try to help you quickly, because there are some common things that you must do or you're going to get very frustrated. One of the things, for example, is before every calculation to clear the memory. On the HP calculator, that's a clear all step. You got to clear all the memory out. Otherwise, you'll be getting errors in your calculations. The other thing that you will run across at times is that you don't have the right frequency of compounding of your interest rate set. On the HP calculators, and as well as TIs, it's a period per year, P/YR key that you use to set the frequency of compounding. If you set the frequency of compounding to where it should be, then you can always put annual interest rates into as the interest per year entry on your calculations. So for example, if you have a 6% mortgage, 6% annual interest rate, but you know that's a monthly payment. It's a monthly annuity, as I said earlier. You'd want to set periods per year to 12, and then the calculator would automatically adjust your 6% annual rate to a periodic rate of 0.5% per month. But as long as you tell the calculator that this is a monthly compounding problem, you can put in annual interest rates, and the calculator will make those adjustments for you. So those are a couple of. Now there's one other pitfall I'll mention. We said we defined what annuities are, right? Annuities are periodic payments of equal amount of cash occurring every period. But the normal assumption is that the payments are made at the end of each period, whether that period's a month or a quarter or a year. So an ordinary annuity is one where the payment occurs at the very end of the defined period. But there's also an alternative structure called an annuity due. This is covered in the text. An annuity due is where the payments begin at the beginning of the period, or the payments are made at the beginning of the period. And on your calculator, if you have one, you'll find a beginning and end toggle that allows you to tell the calculator, am I using an annuity structure where the payment's made at the end of the period or the beginning? And oftentimes, you'll toggle it over to a annuity due structure without intending to do so, and you'll get the wrong answer because you didn't recognize that you toggled it over. But on the HP calculator, your screen actually tells you if you're set for a beginning type of annuity or an annuity due, that is. Okay. In Excel, when you use the functions in Excel, there's usually in most of those discounted cash flow functions, in the argument list, there's the fifth argument, the 0-1 toggle. If it's set for 0, you're set for the computer will assume you have an ordinary annuity. You toggle it to 1, it will assume that you want an annuity due. The default will always be set to 0. You would have to set it to 1. That is for an annuity due if that's what you want. Okay, I'm sure we'll be covering these issues more as we go along. In part 2 of the Chapter 4 material, it also gets into discussions of mixed cash flow streams. On calculators, that involves the use of a mixed cash flow stream is simply one where the periodic payments are not of equal amount, and they may not even be occurring at regular intervals. But the function for that calculation on the calculator is something called a CF sub J, cash flow in time period J, that you use to calculate present values or future values of mixed cash flow streams. Um, let's see. When we talk about compounding, which is also covered in this chapter, of course, when interest is compounded more than once a year, then you have to reflect that in how you structure your solutions to questions. And it also gets us into the distinction between annual nominal rates of interest and effective rates. An effective rate is the rate of interest that if compounded just annually would deliver the same ending value as you would achieve with a nominal annual rate being compounded by more than once a year. So, for example, if you had 12% per year as the nominal rate, but it was compounded monthly. 12% per year compounded monthly would be 12.68% effective. So if you pay 12% compounded monthly, it costs you the same over the course of the year as if you were paying 12.68% compounded annually. So just have some basic working knowledge of the difference between an effective rate and a nominal annual rate. It's also covered in this chapter, the concept of continuous compounding. If you think about going from annual compounding to semi-annual to quarterly, monthly, weekly, daily, at the limit, you can compound continuously. I just wanted you to know that there is such a thing as continuous compounding. It's actually used in some more sophisticated financial models, but we're not going to do anything with it. It gets into the use of exponential functions and so forth that we don't really have need for, but just be aware that there is, at the limit, something as frequent as continuous compounding. Talked about annuities and perpetuities, definition of those. And the reason that understanding how to work with annuities is really important is, again, all of your consumer loan structures are basically annuity structures. You know, we can also call them levelized loan payments, where your payment is the same each month throughout the life of the loan. But one key thing to recognize about these type of loans is that the principal must always equal the present value of the future payments that the loan contract commits you to. So the principal, which we'll normally designate as a present value, is going to be the present value of the payments that you're obligated to make under that contract term or that contract. Likewise, if you want to know the payoff for a loan in the middle of its term, if you want to know how much would I have to pay the bank 10 years into my 30-year mortgage to settle it up, it's just the present value of the payments you have not yet made. So you can set the calculation up so as to calculate the present value of whatever number of payments have not yet been made, discounted back at the contractual rate of interest, and that'll give you your payoff amount. It's very straightforward. This part of the end of this chapter also talks about other types of loan structures other than levelized loans. It talks about pure discount loans, which is similar to the concept on the treasury bills that we talked about earlier. Loans that involve interest-only payments as you go along, just paying interest, and of course having to repay the entire principal at the very end. Those are not something we'll be dealing with very much. The pure discount concepts, though, do apply when you're dealing with either treasury bills or what are called zero coupon bonds. Zero coupon bonds you may have heard of. Again, make no interest payments along the way. you buy them at a discount from what they're going to pay you at maturity, and that difference is your entire reward for that for making that loan. All right. Chapter 5 continues the development of tools for capital budgeting. And capital budgeting, of course, involves the process of deciding whether a given investment is economically attractive. And in many cases, when you're in business, it also involves sorting out which are the best of a group of investments for me to make. If I've got a limited amount of money that I can budget to invest during this period, how do I decide which of the potential investments are the best for me? So you can basically break the capital budgeting process into multiple steps. The first one is where you basically determine the basic economic viability of each investment. And that's going to fall into a decision as to whether the investment has a positive net present value. Because a positive net present value would imply that an investment is at least minimally acceptable from an economic perspective. Or what's the criteria? Do you know what the criteria is if you're using the internal rate of return as your decision tool? If the internal rate of return is greater than your cost of capital, or your hurdle rate, as we'll call it, then the project has basic economic viability. Positive NPV and IRR greater than the cost of capital, those are equivalent criteria when you're looking at a given project by itself. If a project has positive NPV, that means it must have an internal rate of return above its cost of capital. It gets a little more complicated when you have to take perhaps 6 or 10 different projects, which in total would cost $100 million, but you've only got $50 million to invest. How do you decide where to place the $50 million to deliver the most economic benefit? That's called capital rationing. Capital rationing situation, you have to decide what makes the cut and what doesn't. And the net present value tool is the one that you can sort of view as will never fail you. The net present value tool will always give you the right answer. IRR, as we're going to see as we go along here, can sometimes trip you up because picking the highest IRR doesn't necessarily get you the most economic value out of your investment program. So after you've been through the video lectures and through these chapters, hopefully that'll become clearer. In this chapter 5 slide package, the lecture slide package, on slide 8, there's a example of an NPV calculation using the Excel functionality. But basically, there are 3 decision tools that are discussed in this chapter. The first is the payback or discounted payback method, and the internal rate of return and net present value. Now, it's very likely that you may have worked in a business where the payback method was used as the standard criteria for whether an investment was going to be acceptable or not. Do you get your money back in 24 months or less? It's a very simple tool, very easy for employees to understand and use. Unfortunately, it's not financially very sound. It's okay to use on small, routine type of investments. It encourages rapid turnover of capital, but it's not really a sound financial criteria from the point of view of adding to shareholder value, which is as we know, is our fundamental financial decision tool. But read through that. Discounted payback just uses discounted future payments to come up with a payback period, but it still has the problem that it doesn't link to value creation in any way. Something's introduced in this Chapter 5 package around slide 17 that I want to call your attention to. They're called net present value profiles. It's a graphical representation of how the net present value of an investment changes as you change the discount rate. And you start with a very low, usually 0 discount rate, and then you work your way up. And obviously, the higher the discount rate, the lower the net present value will become. And eventually, you get to a point where the net present value goes negative. And I don't know if you've got those slides in front of you, but along about slide 17. Look about slide 17. I think I'm looking at the right one. Yeah, there it is. There's an example of a net present value profile for an example project that's being discussed there. And you see that data where the discount rate runs from 0% to 44%, and the net present values go from 100 to a significant negative number. I have a hard time reading it on my copy here, but do you see that slide that I'm referring to?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you tell from that graph what is the IRR? What's shown there?
19.44.
Right, 19.44%. So the IRR on this graphical representation of this NPV profile is the point where that profile crosses through the horizontal axis, which is another way of saying it's the point at which the net present value goes to 0. And the internal rate of return is defined as the discount rate that forces the net present value to be 0. And you can see it graphically there. If the cost of money, in this case, is greater than 19.44%, this project is not economically viable. It would have a negative net present value. At any cost of capital less than 19.4%, this project has a positive net present value, and therefore, as a standalone project at least, would be minimally acceptable from an economic perspective. The next slide, slide 18, also shows you the function for calculating an IRR. It actually gives you an associated spreadsheet to show you how to use the IRR function in Excel if you want to find IRRs that way. Now, one of the issues with the internal rate of return method you see reflected in slide 21, which is that sometimes there's more than one solution to the IRR. You see that the NPV profile for this project actually crosses through the horizontal axis at 2 different rates, 0% and 100%. You should be aware that the problem of multiple IRRs exists. Sometimes your calculator, if there's a multiple IRR lurking in the problem you're analyzing, it'll just come back with no solution. But multiple IRRs occur only because or only when cash flows change sign more than once. In a prototypical investment, you make an initial negative investment of some amount of money at time 0, and then you get positive cash flow rewards for that investment in future years. You only have one change of sign on your cash flows. That's when you go from time 0 to time 1. But if a project is such that, for whatever reason, the cash flows go negative in the future, that's going to create this situation with multiple IRRs. So we're not going to get deeply into that, just like you to be aware of that potential pitfall. In this chapter, let's see, slides 32 to 36, there's an example that I wanted you to make sure you spent time going through. Yeah, that's the one that compares a couple of two different projects, two different investments, and walks you through the calculation of the NPVs and IRRs, does NPV profiles for those two projects. So spend some soak time on that. But again, we're not going to get too hung up over the multiple IRR condition or situation, other than be aware of the fact that it might happen and why. Now, at the very end of this set of PowerPoint slides, of course, there's the normal quick quiz to give you a quick assessment of whether you've understood some of the concepts. But in this particular one, it involves asking you to calculate some of these variables: payback period, NPV, IRR, and so forth. And for this one, I actually, on the very last slide, gave you the answers. So you can use that to test yourself to see if you can come up with replicate the answers I came up with there to help you solidify your understanding of this material. But, again, capital budgeting is what I normally call the second most important unit in a basic finance course. And it's important because it's second behind the basic use of discounted cash flow techniques. But the reason that it's important is that when you're in a business, I don't care what functional area you're working in a business, sooner or later you're going to be involved in an investment decision and a capital investment project. And you may be working in marketing, but you're going to be the champion for an investment in an expansion of a product line. And so it's really important, even if you're not a financial person, that you are able to work your way through the analysis of justifying a capital investment project. Now we're going to get into more deeply into the details of capital budgeting and cash flow modeling in Chapter 6. That's where the rubber really hits the road. In these chapters, Chapter 5 in particular, what we're trying to do is just develop the decision criteria, the internal rate of return, net present value, and so forth. But in Chapter 6, we'll get into the details of modeling an investment in terms of its cash flow impact on the business. And as I said, no matter what functional area you work in, it's not a good situation to have to be totally dependent upon your financial analyst to run the numbers for you. If you're in a large organization and you have a financial analysis group, they will be the ones who will officially develop the model and so forth. And it's very important you be able to converse with them and analyze what they've done and make sure what they're representing in the model is what you're representing in your project. So that's why capital budgeting is very important. I don't particularly like the way this textbook structures the order in which it treats these topics. This is a very widely used textbook. I mean, it's got wide use in both undergraduate and MBA programs. But having been away from it for a few years and coming back to this latest edition, I'm not real happy with the way they sequence the treatment of topics, but it's one we're going to have to live with. So you can be sure that this textbook is very highly regarded, but I just don't personally like exactly the way the material is laid out. So take it for what it's worth. Since we're not going to get into Chapter 6 this week, those were the only notes that I had for Chapters 4 and 5. Is there anything else that we needed to discuss this evening, or that you should always use these sessions to bring up any open questions, whether it's of an administrative nature or of a related to the material. But
I have a question about Blackboard.
Okay.
I've been having trouble with my Blackboard, and it's if I click on certain things, it'll load pretty fast, and if I click on others, it just it's trying to load, but it's not working. So it's very slow at times, and at times just doesn't want to work at all. Anyone else experience that?
Are you using Internet Explorer?
I have a Mac, so I'm using Safari.
Oh, okay. Maybe you want to try using Safari. You shouldn't have a problem with, but if you try using Chrome or Firefox.
Yeah, because I'm on Safari and it just doesn't want to do anything. So I don't know if anyone else noticed any issues with that. I've used it before from my computer and last semester and it was fine, and it was just this one.
You found it worked okay on Blackboard before?
Yeah, so the last classes I took with the same computer, I didn't have problems with my Blackboard. So I'm not sure if there's been a change that my computer's not compatible with, but it works half of the time and the other half it doesn't want to.
Well, I think there was an update with Blackboard in October, but if you try and use Chrome or Firefox instead of Safari.
I don't know how I would get that on my computer, like Chrome or Firefox.
What's that?
Can you download is Chrome or Firefox something you download?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll have to try it.
And Maureen would, yeah, I guess it doesn't matter which one you try, but I've had that with some of some things too, where Internet Explorer just doesn't work well, and you have to switch over to Firefox or whatever. So either of those two would probably be worth trying as an alternative search engine.
Yeah, because I spend 25 minutes. I'll send you an email right before we started, but I spent 25 minutes trying to pull up the instructions how to log in, and it just would not work. So I ended up sending you an email, but then it finally loaded. So.
Yeah. Well, I saw your email come in. One thing that I alert you to, with this Verizon system I have, it batches my emails into my inbox, so they don't come through, as instantaneously as they do on some systems. So your email asking about a number to call in came in probably 10 minutes into our session. So just in general, if you send me an email and you're trying to figure out why I didn't acknowledge it or respond to it right away, I'm probably not going to see it for 10 or 15 minutes with this Verizon system, and I don't know why it does that, but it does. But I would encourage you to, continue to, if going to Chrome or the Mozilla engine doesn't correct your problem, try to talk to the support people and figure that out, because there's probably an answer to what you're encountering.
Yeah, I figured I'd ask if anyone else noticed the problem before I called the IT help desk.
Yeah. Well, I think Maureen's suggestion is probably a good lead.
Yeah.
That's what I would try first, one of those alternative search engines.
If you call the help desk, they'll probably tell you to do that anyway. To try a different browser.
I had problems once, and that's what they told me to do.
Okay, good. Well, again, just in the way of emphasizing something I've said multiple times, but I really mean it. Don't hesitate. On technical issues like that last question, I'm not going to be of much help. But questions related to the course and the material or homework, as I sent the email out during the week, that don't burn a lot of time on an individual homework problem or whatever. But fire me an email. I've been pretty good. I think I'm pretty good in responding to emails. It may take me a couple of hours, but most of the time I'm probably going to fire an answer right back to you, because like most people, I'm on the computer for much of the day. Mornings here in the East is the best time to actually catch me live on the computer. Evenings are good now this time of the year as well. Afternoons might be a little iffy, but I was out I was out working on one of my barn roofs this afternoon, so I wasn't doing email in the afternoon, but that's my typical daily structure. Okay,
Now,
go ahead.
if we're having trouble figuring out a question or a solution to a question, are you okay with us sending you where we are so far? So if it's a long problem and I'm halfway there and I can't figure out the second half, can I send you what I have so you can kind of help me work through it that way?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's obviously it's whatever the more you can tell me about where you are, where you're hung up, the easier it will be for me to give you guidance. So by all means, yeah. And again, the homework problems are, in this particular type of online course anyway, it's really essential part of the learning process. And so don't hesitate to interact with me on those problems. It's not like it's a test, even though I'm grading them. I'm willing to make it interactive and give you some help on it. Okay? All right. Well, maybe next week we can have 5 boxes on the display here. I hope I can get Khalees into these sessions. I'm hopeful I can anyway. I'll talk to him about it. But if there's nothing else for now, have a good evening and a good weekend. But and I'll look for some revisions to the syllabus. It may take me a while to actually get a full revision of the syllabus out, but you'll see some changes to the week's assignment reflected tomorrow in the Blackboard postings. Okay, so
Thank you.
don't hesitate. If you're getting inundated, don't just be civil, be nice, and tell me I'm overloading you. But I'm more than willing to work with you in any way we can. Okay.
Okay.
All right, guys. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Talk to you later.